Hi, and welcome to The Reality of Being an Indie Author. I'm Katherine Jones Payne, the founder and managing editor of Quillpen Editorial and the editor of Splickety Magazine. I'm so excited to be presenting today with award-winning best-selling YA fantasy author Katie Cross. Katie has independently published 6 novels and a novella, and has done a really great job of finding success in her independent career. So Katie, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about the books that you've written?
Yeah, so I have 5 young adult fantasy novels that comprise the Network series, and one of them is a novella. If any of you are interested in reading them, you can see them at missmaples.com. And I have also started a chick lit series, which is called the Health and Happiness Society series. The first book, Bonbons Yoga Pants, has been published, and the second book, I Am Girl Power, is forthcoming hopefully at the end of this year. So, as we get started with this presentation, we have a lot of information to cover. So, I'm going to do a brief breakdown so you guys know what to expect, and then we'll get right into the information. So, first off, we're going to do a couple overviews of traditional publishing and independent publishing so we're all on the same page. Then we're going to talk more in depth about what is indie slash self publishing, what a day in the life of an indie publisher is like, business as an indie, the cost of self publishing, what royalties to expect, and how many books I have sold and other indies have sold, as well as how to network. And I have a list of fantastic resources for you if you have any questions about that. So, first of all, let's go through traditional publishing and talk basically about the structure. First of all, in a traditional publishing model, what an author is going to do is you're going to write a book. And after you write the book, you're going to find an agent that believes in the book and loves it. Your agent is going to bid your book to publishing houses. So you're going to bid to publishing houses, and as soon as you find someone that offers what you want and gives you the venue that you'd like, you're going to accept it. Then you sign all of your rights for that book over to the publisher, and they edit, design, typeset, format, cover, print, and ship your book. So basically, in the traditional publishing model, the publisher is going to do everything. Now, there's a couple problems with that model that we're running into lately. The first one that comes to mind is Hachette versus Amazon. Hachette is one of the big 5 publishing companies that wanted to set their own prices for ebooks, which means they were pricing some ebooks at $15 to $20. Well, Amazon, who wants to make money off these books, is telling Hachette, look, that's too expensive. We don't think you should publish it that much. And what basically happened was a stall. Amazon stopped publishing Hachette's ebooks until Hachette came up with a better pricing model, and there was this big back and forth for a while. It eventually came down to them agreeing that Hachette and other publishers could set their own prices for the books, but Amazon would put under that price this price set by the publisher, so that readers didn't think Amazon was setting a ridiculously expensive ebook price. Now, next, we're seeing actually a big decline in sales across all 5 big publishing companies, and we're talking $1 million across the board, like monthly. The month of August, the headlines were really big about this, that big 5 traditional publishing has seen massive declines across all 5. And then we have the indie takeover is really plaguing the traditional model right now, because indies are starting to publish their own books and becoming really successful at it. We're also seeing major retailers like Barnes & Noble struggling to survive. Barnes & Noble has recently decided to start a restaurant business because books just aren't selling enough for them, and they just had a brand new CEO takeover. Shareholders are not excited about that because it was very unexpected, and the last CEO really didn't help the business at all. And then we have programs like Kindle Select, which is allowing anyone to publish an ebook and has fed into the indie takeover, and is really commandeering a lot of sales, a lot of authors that is not going through the traditional publishing model. So that's really created kind of a jam for traditional publishers. Now let's take a look at indie slash self-publishing. What happens in indie publishing is the author writes the book, they orchestrate the edits, meaning they find an editing team and they themselves have the editor do the book on their own time. They go through the edits, all that stuff. The author publishes the book, and then the author markets the book. The author also retains all rights, they retain all royalties, and they retain all creative control over cover design, interior formatting, etc. And basically, the author is the publisher, which is why we call it self-publishing. One important note I need to put here that a lot of people are confused by is that CreateSpace is not a publisher, it is a printer. So if you have self-published a book and you print your paperback through CreateSpace, that does not mean that they are your publisher. You are your publisher. They are simply your printer, so they don't want anything to do about being called your publisher. Now let's define what an indie publisher is, because there are two working definitions out there and I want us to be on the same page. So the first working definition of an indie is that an indie publisher is a small press publisher that is not one of the big five. For those of you that don't know, the big five publishers are Simon & Schuster, HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, Hachette, and Macmillan. Now, the second working definition of an indie publisher is that you are self-published, which basically means that indie publishing and self-publishing are the same thing. There is an argument out there in the world that a self-publisher is not an indie publisher, and there's many sides that you can take on this. But for our working purposes today, we will assume that indie published and self-published are the same thing. Now let's talk about the good things that have come from indie publishing. First of all, power is shifting to the authors. We have power over our books, we have power over the genre we write, we have power over everything that goes into this book. We also get higher royalties. We make 70% royalties versus the typical 15% of traditional publishing. Now, a side note is that many authors in traditional publishing, not all, make about 25% royalties for their ebooks and 15% generously on paperback. So, for example, if you buy a $10 traditionally published ebook, the author will typically earn about $1.50, which is actually on the higher range of royalties. But I, however, would earn about $7 in royalties, depending on the file size of that book. So it's much, much higher royalties. Also, a good side is that we have greater production control over things like pricing, cover design, and release day. I can change the price of my books at any time I want. I pick the cover design that I love the best, and I choose the day I want it released, so I don't have to wait a year to a year and a half for the publisher to finish what they do. Now, a good thing about indie publishing is that there's a lack of a gatekeeper, which means that books that previously wouldn't have been published can be published because there isn't us waiting for the gatekeeper to give us the okay to move through. Another good thing is that I hold all the rights for my books, which means I can do whatever I want with them. And there's also the ability to have a quicker response time to issues or changes. So if I find errors in my books, then I can just create a new file, upload it, and those errors are gone. Now, of course, there is not so good side of indie publishing. One of those things is the lack of a gatekeeper. While it's a good thing for indies, it's also a bad thing for indies because the lack of a gatekeeper naturally leads to bad books being published, which leads to an epic slush pile. And an epic slush pile of bad books means that really good books have a hard time being seen. So the fact that anybody can publish means there's been an influx of really bad books that haven't even been edited. And a lot of readers have lost some trust in self-published books, rightly so, because some of them should not have been published. Self-employment taxes are really high. And when you're an indie and you're pulling in money from your books, this can be a difficult thing to deal with if you don't pay quarterly taxes. The upfront cost of self-publishing can be high, and we will go more into this later. And then indie publishing and self-publishing is a lot of work. Writing in general is a lot of work, but because we have to do the editing, the collaboration, the marketing, the publishing, that takes away from a lot of our writing time. So let's talk about a survey that I did of 52 indies who answered a bunch of questions. We're not going to go over this in great detail, but I just wanted to point out that out of 51 responses, most people believed, meaning 37 people believed, that marketing was the most difficult thing and exposure was the second most difficult. And I absolutely agree with that. Marketing is a steep hill to climb when you're learning how to do it. And getting exposure to get out of that slush pile is equally as hard. Now, when I asked people, would you recommend self-publishing to your friends, I was really, really happy to see that most people said it depends on the friend, and the rest of them said yes. There wasn't any no's or maybes here, which I think was really cool and really testifies to the positive attitude of indies. And then what most indies said, the trait that they feel a successful self-publisher or indie would require most is tenacity, and that is absolutely true. Success in publishing, whether you're an indie or traditional, comes with time and a lot of work. So let's look at some recent market trends in self-publishing. Now, there is a website called authorearnings.com that is a fantastic resource to see what is going on in the market. So what we're looking at in this graph here is ebooks sold from February 2014 to May of 2016. And I'm going to draw most of your attention to the top two lines on the graph. That purple one is big 5 traditional publishers. You can see a massive plummet from 35% of ebooks all the way down to, what is that, like 23 or 24%. Throughout 2015. And then we see a huge spike in indie published books. That blue line along the bottom, that uncategorized single author publisher, a lot of indies may fall into that. That is just, they didn't know how to categorize those single author publishers, so they just did a separate category for them. And they held surprisingly true for quite a while, and then we're seeing another climb for them. So what we see here is really significant because in 27 months, indies have either just grown or stayed the same for just a couple months at a time, but we're seeing huge peaks in the rise of sales here. Now on the next graph, we're going to see royalties earned. And again, there is a huge difference between indie publishing and big 5 publishing. We're looking at over 20% difference in royalties earned and some really big spikes there. Now those downward spikes for big 5 published traditional publishing probably has a lot to do with the fact that they were trying to charge $20 for an ebook. And what we're starting to see now is some leveling out, especially in ebook sales. On the previous graph, we saw some leveling out there because traditional publishers are starting to say, oh, okay, so people aren't going to buy this ebook for $20. We're going to go ahead and lower it. So actually, this last month in August, the average ebook price for traditionally published ebooks dropped down to $8 from $10. So they're finally starting to kind of see the light, and I think we'll see a little more evening out from them as that continues through the end of the year. All right, so let's dive into being a self-publisher and talk about a day in the life of an indie. So my life as an indie can be kind of stressful, but I have 3 main priorities. Now, my number one priority, always, when it comes to work, setting family aside because they're my absolute priority, my number one work priority is writing. If I only have an hour to work, I will spend that hour writing. If I have 2 hours to work, I will try and spend an hour and a half of that writing, and then 30 minutes with my second priority, which is business. I have a lot of organization, a lot of people that work for me, a lot of emails, a lot of coordination that goes on, and I try to fit that in only after my writing is done. And my third one is reading. As a writer, I cannot write well unless I'm actively reading within my genres and outside my genres. So I have a 1-year-old son, a husband who deploys frequently, and 2 very energetic dogs, as well as a business to run and books to publish. So the question I get the most is, when do I work? Well, I work when my babysitters are here. So I have babysitters come about 4 times a week. I recently just hired another one, and babysitter turnover has been pretty insane lately. So for a while, I was only averaging 4 to 5 hours of babysitters a week, where now I'm at about 8 hours. They come 4 times a week, 2 hours a day. And then I work at nap time from 11 to 1 o'clock every day. So I'm averaging anywhere from 2 to 4 hours of work a day. Now those figures come in when my husband is not deployed, because I spend evenings with him. So when my husband is deployed, I can actually get about 6 to 7, even 8 hours of work a day, because I just start working as soon as my son goes to bed, and sometimes work until really late. So it very much varies. My son could be sick and not nap, and maybe I won't get any work in that day. It's very up and down. But in general, I spend about 120 minutes writing every day that I can, and I just do business as I'm able. So if my son is entertaining himself on the slide in the backyard, I'll try to respond to emails or Facebook messages then. I will Skype with editors or my project manager or my typesetter while my son is playing instead of trying to do email conversations. I just try and fit things in where I can. If I'm in doubt about how much time I will have to work that day, I will just write. It is always my priority. And then I do evenings on occasion when my husband is home, depending on kind of what our schedule is. The slide that I wanted to include for things in my daily life was about writing software. Writing software can make my life a lot easier. The number one software that I want to recommend to you guys is Scrivener. If you haven't heard of it, it will change your life. It's a great organizational tool that's based around a binder. So every story is basically a binder. It typically runs at about $50. It's available for Mac and PC. It goes on sale all the time. If you do NaNoWriMo, I know that they often do half-off coupons. If you've participated in NaNoWriMo, you get a code. It's a fantastic piece of software. Go on YouTube, watch a few how-to videos, and just start getting comfortable with it. It's changed my life. Then there's also YWriter, which came out before Scrivener and is internet-based, and is very similar to Scrivener, but not as integrated. I don't think YWriter was recommended by someone else for me to put on here as a great organizational tool. I know Evernote is used by a lot of authors to keep track of ideas and notes between computers. That's a good one. I like to use mind mapping software. My thoughts go all over the place, so I do spider graphs all the time. That makes it really fast and saves it so I don't have paper all over my house. And then, of course, Microsoft Word. I recommend having Microsoft Word if you're a Mac user, because I always try to convert from Pages to Word, but it's messed up my documents so many times that we finally just bought MS Word.
Yeah, as an editor who has worked with people who have, on a number of occasions, converted from Pages to Word, and just don't do it. Don't do it.
No. Catherine and I have had so many headaches because I tried that, so just buy Microsoft Word and just save yourself the pain. So the biggest challenges that I think I face in self-publishing kind of come in this order that I'm going to give you. First of all, is time management. As you saw, it's very busy being a self-publisher. It's extremely busy having a 1-year-old, and it's even busier when my husband's deployed. So managing my time well is always my first priority. I don't want my work to take away from engagement with my son. So my son is always my number one priority, and then I fit work in around time with him. My second challenge is finding and keeping a babysitter, actually. I think I've been through 6 or 7 babysitters. I don't know if it's because my son is kind of a feral child, or if he's just extremely busy and scares people off, or if it's just life. But finding and interviewing and locating and keeping a babysitter on a decent schedule has been very difficult, although I think, fingers crossed, we finally settled into something. The continuous learning and application that writing should inspire in every author has been a challenge for me, because that means every manuscript I write is constantly evolving and it's different from the one before that, and that means my process in my previous book will not be the process that I employ in my current book, because I'm always trying to improve, and that's a really good challenge and something that every author should face. The other challenge is coordinating with my team. Because I have so many people on my team, I get lots of emails, lots of different directions, different books, different things going. So getting all those emails answered on time and getting things put together at the same time can be challenging. And then deadlines. I've missed 3 self-imposed deadlines this year and have started having fans emailing me asking me where the books are. So meeting my deadlines while trying to manage my time has been another big challenge. So this next section is talking about business as an indie, and this is probably the most important information that I feel I can give you. Now, this is information I wished someone could have told me when I started out, but I couldn't find from anyone. So I want to give all of this information to you so that you feel like you go into self-publishing, you're going in with your eyes wide open. Now, first of all, self-publishing is a business. It is a business. It is not a cop-out for traditional publishing. It is not an easy way to publish. It is something that you are doing to make money. So it needs to be treated like a business, and you do that by showing business intent. Now, right here, I want to give a huge shout out to Jace Killian. I met him at a writing conference, and he's fantastic. He's an accountant by day and a superhero by night, and he forms LLCs and does all this accounting stuff. So he gave me much of the information that's in this section and has helped guide many of my own personal decisions. So if you guys want to check him out, that would be awesome. So I want to talk about business as an indie because this aspect of self-publishing is ignored far too much. The writing and the publishing is emphasized all the time, but not the business. So what we're going to talk about is how you can show business intent. And one way to do that is to have a separate bank account. Another way to do that is have monthly meetings, even if it's just with yourself. Just go on Microsoft Word, get a meetings minute template, fill out a few things, print it out, and then sign it and say, look, I just had this meeting with myself. I discussed with myself how many royalties we made this month. Boom. File your taxes on time as your business. That shows business intent. And then have an operating agreement. So these little bullet points I just gave you, we're going to go into more detail right now. So first of all, as we talk about business, we have to actually establish what the business of self-publishing is. And when you are a business, you have a publishing business, you basically form an imprint. Well, what is an imprint? So I think the best analogy to explain publishing imprints is to show you this graph. General Motors is a huge company that sells a lot of different cars. So you have Cadillacs, you have Chevy, you have Buicks, you have those other ones I've never heard of. GM is like a big publishing house. And Chevrolet and Cadillac and GMC and Buick, those are all their imprints, which is basically just a way to organize what they sell. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you a publishing imprint example, which is HarperCollins. So when we went through the big 5 traditional publishers, we saw all of them, and HarperCollins was one of them. Well, HarperCollins isn't just HarperCollins. It is Harper Voyager and Harper Teen and HarperCollins Children's Books and Harper One and Harper Business. Those are the imprints of HarperCollins. Harper Voyager is science fiction fantasy. So you will not see a how-to book like How to Form an LLC under Harper Voyager imprint. Harper Teen is pretty self-explanatory. So you're not going to see a science fiction fantasy book in HarperCollins Children's Book because the imprint is for children. So it's basically an organizational tool. These big publishing houses that have millions of books say, well, we need a way to funnel this down so you have imprints. Now, as an indie, we also need imprints. So like traditional publishing, indies may also have more than one imprint. For example, my imprints are both here on the right side. THHS Publishing is my chick lit series, and Antebellum Publishing is my young adult fantasy series, and just my general fantasy stories. You will mostly see 2 imprints in cross-genre writers, kind of like I write in both chick lit and fantasy. Now, imprints are not that complicated. They just sound really complicated, because an imprint can be as simple as creating a logo and slapping it on the back of your book without even forming an LLC or doing a DBA, which we'll talk more about later. But basically, you can just put your name even, like Katie Publishing, put it on the back of your book, and that's your imprint. That's who you are as a self-publisher. For example, this is the back of my book, Bon Bon's Yoga Pants. It's my first chick lit book, and down at the bottom you see in pink letters THHS Publishing. That is my imprint. That tells the reader, okay, this is a publishing house that this book went through. Now, why should you have an imprint? Well, first of all, it adds credibility, and as we discussed earlier, it shows business intent. Also, some bookstores won't stock books without them. As an indie, it's a little bit more difficult to get into bookstores, but it's not impossible. And so you can do it. It just takes more footwork on your part, but it's not going to happen if you don't have an imprint. The imprint gives you a name to work under that separates your work life and your real life, and that is really important because we'll go into more reasons later, but you need to have separate things going on in order to keep both of them safe. And then the imprint is your publisher as an indie, so you are basically a small press publisher, but you just don't publish anyone but yourself. So let's get into a little more nuts and bolts here and talk about LLCs versus DBAs, or DBAs are also known as sole proprietorships. I need to put this disclaimer out there. I'm not your lawyer and I'm not your accountant, so I'm not giving you any legal or financial advice. This is just information and advice that I have garnered from people that I've talked to at writers' conferences and lawyers and accountants and that kind of thing. So you're going to have to decide what's best for you and your imprint on your own. But this is information I wanted to have that I couldn't find for a long time. So first of all, an LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. In an LLC, what you have is basically a company that protects what is within the company from external liability and what is outside the company from internal liability. Or in other words, it basically just separates your personal stuff from your business stuff. So let's say someone came up to me and said, Katie, you took my story and my life and my name and you put it into a book, and I'm going to sue you for all your book rights. Then I have this LLC that my book, we'll say it's Bonbons Yoga Pants, you're suing me for. Bonbons Yoga Pants is protected in this LLC. So what happened to say, well, I'm going to take your house because you stole my life story, so I'm going to sue you for your house. Well, they can't do that because I'm protected by an LLC. At the most is they could sue me for my book rights or whatever else, but they couldn't take like my house. Now, if you're doing a DBA or a sole proprietorship, you're basically, a DBA, by the way, stands for doing business as. So you're basically just saying, like, my name is Katie Cross, but I'm doing business as Antebellum Publishing. In terms of taxes, a DBA is no different. Like, you're not getting less or more money for it. The only difference between a DBA and an LLC in reality is that there's no protection between your personal and your business accounts. So if someone came up to me and said, Katie, you stole my story and my life in Bonbons Yoga Pants, I'm going to sue you for your house and your car and all your money. Then if they had a really good lawyer, they could maybe do that. They can take from my business or from my personal stuff. So the LLCs just protect what you have in terms of your work. So for my different genres, I formed 2 LLCs because if I had someone suing me over Bonbons Yoga Pants, I didn't want them to get the rights for my fantasy stories. So that protects both lines within their own LLC. Also, if you have multi-levels set up like that and you are showing all this business intent and saying, look, this is my career, it is going to not scare some lawyers off, but it's going to make them think twice about really jumping into this litigation. Like, well, they've formed LLCs, they have a bank account, they have an operating agreement, they're taking this seriously. So, no, I'm not going to take this case, or whatever that may be. So, let's talk about an operating agreement. So, first of all, what are they? Well, basically, an operating agreement is a set of company-specific operating rules. It just sets forth how you are going to manage your company. So for an LLC, you'll say, well, this member has this power, or this member can do this, or this is when we're going to have meetings, that kind of thing. Now, how do you get one? That's a really good question. There are a couple options. One option that's really fast and fairly inexpensive is LegalZoom. It's $100. You go online, it's all set up. You just answer the questions, pay the $100, boom, you print it out, and it's right there ready for you. You can get an attorney, but you're starting at upwards of $500 and more, or you can find a template online. Now, Jace, my friend who hooked me up with lots of information when I was first learning about it, sent me a sample of an operating agreement for Colorado. Now, it is 39 pages long, so it's pretty intense. He assured me that I didn't have to have all of those pages filled out, and he highlighted the best areas. But I only tell you that just to give you a general idea that they can be pretty big, especially when you have more intricate companies that need to answer all those questions. As a self-publisher, and you're the only one, it's not going to be that complicated, and the LegalZoom ones are pretty simple. It takes like 10 minutes. I've done one. Something else I want to kind of bring out here is that the operating agreements aren't filed anywhere within the state of your LLC. Like, it's not like you stamp it, send it to the state, and they mail it and say, good job, self-publisher, you filed an operating agreement. But they're meant to be established at the formation of your LLC. So it's something that you print out, tuck into your binder, and then you have it signed and dated. If it's needed in the event of litigation, your lawyer can say, look, she has business intent. She has an operating agreement, an LLC, a bank account. She's done this many monthly meetings. So this is a legitimate business that she's running here. Now, it may not seem that important to have your own bank account, but it is so important to have a bank account for your business because, once again, it establishes business intent, but also it keeps things separate from your personal. And it simplifies taxes and your tax deductions so much, I cannot even tell you. The first 6 months, well, probably the first year of self-publishing, I did not have a separate bank account, and that was the dumbest idea I've ever had because my income was mixing with my husband's and my purchases were mixing with our daily purchases, and trying to do taxes was this massive headache, and I didn't really know how much I made, and it was just a nightmare. So I started one, I think within 9 months of publishing, and it just made my life so much easier. Also, it establishes business intent, and it keeps your personal spending safer because one less account and place for your personal bank account to be and possibly be hacked is just keeping you safer. Now taxes. When it comes to self-employment taxes and self-publishing, I want to highly recommend QuickBooks Self-Employed. It's an online program, so you can log into it anywhere. I think at first I paid $4.99 a month, and I now pay like $7.99 a month, and it's fantastic. It's fast. You can set rules, so whenever you get income from somewhere, it's automatically put as a business income. You can set rules for deductions, and it figures out the deductions. It gives you this big reminder when quarterly taxes are due. It's so worth its money. It absolutely is. Self-employment taxes and taxes with self-publishing, I recommend that you pay quarterly. You don't have to, unless it's a sales use and tax license, which I'll get into later. But income taxes, if you pay quarterly, you don't have a big $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 check at the end of the year to all of a sudden have to pay, which, yes, does happen for lots of self-publishers. In doing your taxes, pay attention to what deductions are available and how, because that really whittles down how much is owed. If you get QuickBooks Self-Employed, they do this automatically, and they really help you out with that.
And one thing to keep in mind is if you're, if you're in a position where you can just hire a CPA to do your taxes, finding a CPA who specializes in helping creative professionals can really help you maximize your deductions. It took me as an editor a couple years to decide that I was just going to outsource my taxes to a CPA, and honestly, I'm pretty sure he saved me more in deductions than I ended up paying him. So that can be something, especially if numbers aren't your thing and you try the QuickBooks interface and you want to jump out a window, which I definitely did every time I tried to enter anything into QuickBooks. Hiring a CPA can be really helpful.
Yeah, and that's definitely an option for some people who have that money, and if QuickBooks just didn't work out for you, definitely consider that, because I'm sure they have so many loopholes they can find. It's typically said that the IRS gives you 3 years to prove this isn't a hobby. I've heard that thrown out there a lot, but to be honest, I don't really know what happens after 3 years. I don't know if you're audited, if they can kind of come after you and say something. But if you have shown business intent and you have a separate bank account and you're paying your quarterly taxes and your income and all that is continuous, then it's obviously not a hobby. Now,
the general rule of thumb, too, is you're going to want to try to show a profit, even a small profit, by year 3.
Yes.
Sometimes sometimes things happen and you decide to invest in your business, and that's not going to be feasible for everyone to hit that target exactly, but really try to hit that target if you can.
Yeah, because you're getting a lot of deductions if you're not pulling a profit, and I think they just want to make sure that you're not just trying to take those deductions and you're not really working to make a profit, so you have to pay. Right. That was kind of my understanding. Now, when I first started as an indie, I was organizing my own book signings, like at Starbucks and coffee shops. And so I was trying to find information on sales tax and use licenses, and it was a nightmare. So I will give you what I know here. If you are organizing book signings and you want to go to Starbucks or an independent coffee shop or something, and you are going to be collecting the money, then you need to sign up for sales tax and use license in order to pay the sales tax for those books. This is not an issue if you are going through a store. So if you find a used bookstore or a Barnes & Noble or somewhere else where the customer will take that book and go to the store and pay the store, they will be paying the sales tax, and then they'll pay you your cut. But if you are accepting the money, you have to pay the sales tax, and you have to have a sales tax and use license to collect that money. It's not really as difficult as it sounds. You just have to go online to whatever state you're doing the sales in, sign up for a sales tax and use license, and then you have to report every quarter, even if you don't have sales. So for a while, I had 4 different sales tax and use licenses in 4 different states because I was doing a book tour and we were moving, and it was pandemonium trying to report those. So I finally just closed all my sales tax and use licenses because I don't have the time to organize book signings like that anymore. I just do them through bookstores, and then I don't have to worry about it. So if any of you have a question about sales tax and use licenses and book signings or any of that, just shoot me an email and I'll tell you about my experience. Cost of self-publishing. A few thoughts before we dive into this that I want to say. Many things in self-publishing can be done on your own to save money. That does not mean I condone that. It just means it happens, and if you're really, really desperate and you're willing to take the time to learn what to do, it absolutely can be done. However, you need to leverage the price of your time. For me, time is the most precious commodity I have. I don't want my work time taking away from time with my son and my husband. So when I have work time, it is writing time. So for me, it's worth it to pay the money to have other people do these things. So I don't have to worry about it, and I put all my time into writing. The other thing about this is that if you are not having a professional do this, you want to make sure that you do the work so that if you're doing these things, you give it that professional feel. Your goal in self-publishing should be that your book will not be distinguishable from a traditional publishing book. If that is not your goal, you need to reevaluate whether you should be in self-publishing. Also, network, network, network. Networking can be the key for you to find your team and your team that is charging the right price for you. And if you look for people building their portfolios like editors that, you give them a sample and you like them, but they're still trying to find more people to edit, or cover designers, graphic designers who are looking to build their portfolio, look for those, and sometimes they can offer a little bit of a cheaper price. And then if you funnel people their way, a lot of the time they can kind of help you out with costs. Now let's go into cover design. The cover is the most important selling tool in your book, hands down. I don't think a single person will dispute this. I put a picture of one of my book covers up here, which is The High Priestess, because I am madly in love with it, and because my cover designer is a professional, and it shows. That is a catchy book cover. It has the right structure for the genre. It has great coloring, and it's just a great eye-grabbing book color, or book cover. So, with book cover design, you have three options. Number one, you can buy a pre-made book cover, which will be more generic appearing because someone just makes it like, okay, this looks like maybe a romance cover. I'm going to put a redhead and she's in a big dress. And then you come along and say, I have a romance book with a redhead and I love this dress. I'm just going to go buy that. Well, you can do that because they're generic, cheaper, and they actually can be fairly decent. But since they are so generic, it is more likely to look less engaging and more like a self-published book that didn't have as much time taken into it.
And you also,
now that is not.
And you also have to keep in mind that they're selling that template to anyone who will shell out the $50 or $60 for it, which means that there could be, 2 dozen or 3 dozen or 100 books in your genre that have that exact same cover, just with a different title and an author name on it.
So make sure if you're getting pre-made that it will not be sold to anyone else. That once you buy that, it's off the market. That's absolutely something you should make sure. Good point. Now, you can, for your second option, you can make your own. I do not recommend this in general. I know some very successful self-publishers that create their own covers that look really good. And are beautiful and well done, but I can guarantee you they've researched the industry requirements, they know the genre-based appeal for the covers, and they've used, good design software. If you're determined to do your own cover, and you're just convinced it's not worth the money, or you just don't have the money, or don't want to wait till you have the money, then go to Canva or some other editing, like design software. They have like a template that will make it the right pixel size, and start looking around. They even have examples there. Pay attention, get online, Google industry requirements, look at what sells, what doesn't, learn typography, because typography is huge, do all of those things so you can put together a unique, well-crafted book cover on your own if that's what you're doing. I know there are graphic designers out there who are also authors who put together their own gorgeous book covers, which I think is a really cool skill to have. And now third, you can hire it out, which is what I have always done because I am not graphically inclined. You have several options. There are websites like 99 Designs, which is basically where you say, this is the project I have, and a whole bunch of people make their rendition of it, and you pick the one you like the best and you buy that. There's a lot of debate over where sites like 99 Designs are ethical. We won't get into that too much, but just know it's out there. You can network into someone who does fantastic book covers. If you guys want my girl, I'll give you her information at the end. She is phenomenal and just does brilliant book covers. So ask your friends, look at self-published book covers that you love, see who did it, and just start looking around. Another, just look at Google graphic designers for self-publishing. Just start looking for those people and seeing what you can find. An independent designer, you can plan anywhere from $250 to $1,000. A lot of this varies on the portfolio and what type of cover you're doing, especially genre, because some are more complicated. Like these in my Annabelle collection are a bit more complicated than others. But you're looking at a ballpark of $500. Lulu is a website you can go to. It's $500. CreateSpace, which is the printer we talked about earlier, will help you out. It's about $700 through them. Prices vary based on the type of your cover. So ebooks are going to be cheaper than a full paperback spread. And then 99 Designs that I mentioned a couple slides ago, their packages start at $2.99 and go up to about $12.99. So those are kind of some ballparks to expect. Now let's talk about editing. Editing will probably be your greatest expense. I think it should be your greatest expense. But it's also your greatest investment in having a sound, amazing book. When it comes to finding an editor, you need to network around. Make sure you pay attention to genre. If you're writing science fiction, you don't really want an editor who only does romance doing your book. Check out their portfolio, see what they've done or haven't done before, and then make sure to ask them about turnaround time. Not necessarily because you want to put a time limit on them, but just so that you know ahead of time what to expect. Now, some editing prices that Catherine and I have discussed and I've ballparked by researching breaks down here. There are many different types of editing. There's, developmental, copy, line, proofreading, there's structural, there's all kinds. But for the sake of this presentation, I went with the 4 basic ones that I use. Developmental is my first edit. You can find anywhere from $500 to $2,000 for a developmental edit. A copy edit, which is much more involved than a developmental. Developmental is more like the big picture, looking at the whole story, the plot, the structure, the pacing, that kind of thing. Copy and line edits are line by line, word by word, paragraph by paragraph, structure, like flow, grammar, all that kind of stuff. Those can be much more expensive, and you're often looking at more than $2,000, especially with well-known editing houses that have more experience in clients. And then proofreading will probably be your cheapest part of editing because they're just reading through looking for glaring obvious mistakes. You're looking at $100 to $500. All of these prices are based on typically the word count of your book. So if you have a $150,000 fantasy epic, that's going to be way more expensive than like a $60,000 romance. So just keep, or 60,000 word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't pay $60,000 on editing. It's not worth that much on a single book, I assure you.
No. 60,000 word romance book would be far different than a 150,000 word fantasy epic. So personally, this year, I spent about, if not over, $2,000 in editing. I budget for about $5,000 a year. I've missed a book deadline, so if I had been closer to that deadline, I would probably be closer to my budget this year. Now, ebook formatting is another cost that self-publishers face. You're looking at an average cost of $250. This is the easiest thing to do on your own because you can find formatting programs like Scrivener, Calibri, Smashwords, and Drafted Digital to do this at home. Scrivener, you can have it all set up right, and then you basically just compile it as an ebook, and it spits out the file for you. It's the easiest. I think Scrivener is what most people do who have Scrivener anyway. Calibri is a program that you download and can actually use as a library for ebooks as well as to create and prepare your own ebooks. Smashwords and Drafted Digital, you can actually give them a Microsoft Word document and they will format it without charge into like an EPUB format. I'm pretty sure they do Mobi as well. I have Kella Campbell with eBooks Done Right do my ebooks because, again, I don't want to worry about doing it when I could be writing. She does some tweaking for me. This is a screenshot of one of my ebooks. She put those little hearts on the side. She centers the title and the chapter. She has, the capital L on the drop letter. She just does a lot of little tweaks like that for me are worth the price. She also hand codes the whole thing and even proofreads it a little bit for me. So she is worth her weight in gold.
I will say if you use a formatting program, make sure that you painstakingly check each page for just issues in the algorithm. A lot of the time it's fine. A lot of the time you won't find anything really funky going on, but it happens often enough, and you see this often enough in independently published ebooks, that just if you're not paying a professional to do it, then you need to comb over the whole thing with a fine tooth comb.
Yep. Now, typesetting is an average of $500 to $2,000. If you don't know, typesetting is basically the interior of your paperbacks. You can see here, this is from my book, Bonbons Yoga Pants. We have a section, like a little section design that we put in between scenes. Chris Bell, my typesetter, he creates like a chapter like design and then drop words at the beginning. He does all of that and all of the title page and structure, and he checks every single page. He does all that for me, again, because I just don't have the time. This can also be done on your own. Again, if you are going to go this way, you want to research industry standards. Learning Adobe would go a really long way in helping you do this. And look at a whole bunch of other books that you really like and that have been well done and see how they do it, because a lot of this is stylistic. Like, page numbers are sometimes on the side and sometimes they're in the bottom right corner, and sometimes the chapter name is at the top and sometimes it's just the book name. Just see what you like, see what is done in the genre, and go with that. And then there are lots of how-to tutorials if you're going to do this on your own. I tried doing it on my own with my first book, and it was really difficult. Steep learning curve. It took me a long time. I had more time then because I have a kid, but I didn't end up doing it again because it just, for me, wasn't worth the time. Okay, so now that we have talked about cover design, editing, and typesetting, let's put all of this together and discuss the total possible cost for an entire ebook. Your cheapest option is $0, which I absolutely do not recommend, although people do it that way. Your typical mid-range costs, we're looking at $2,000 to $3,500 for like a typically good ebook. Now, your most expensive, you want to look at about $7,000 and higher. If you're higher than $7,000, I want you to kind of evaluate your team. It could still be an okay number if you are using like really, really good graphic designers and high editors and those kinds of things. But just evaluate your team to make sure they have the experience to back up those prices. And also realize that every ebook is going to vary in cost with editing and design needs. For example, you're going to have a higher design need with like a cookbook versus a fiction book.
So let's break costs down a little bit further. There are essentially 3 tiers that I like to talk about when discussing how much an ebook is going to cost. And the highest tier is what I would call the platinum level, giving your book the platinum treatment. For an average length book, so in the 65,000 to 100,000 word range, you're often going to be looking at $6,000 to $7,500. And you'll spend this much when you want the best product possible and you either have quite a bit of money to spend on it, or for some reason you really need to be at the top of the industry in terms of quality. So I'm coming out with my debut novel next year, and I'm spending this much money on it because I'm working as an editor. It's really, and I help a lot of indies through the process of publishing and give them a lot of advice on how to produce a professional book. So for me, it's really important that my book look like it came out of a major publisher and that it look really, really professional. Most people don't need to do this for most of their books, and especially for your first book. The level that I recommend most people go in at is what I would call the gold level. And at this level, you're going to be spending about $3,500 to $4,500 unless your book runs really long. And I would say spend this much money when it's important to you to produce a professional looking book that could come out of a publishing house, but when you're wanting to cut a few corners to save some money. And then the next tier that a lot of my authors use is the silver treatment. So here you're going to be spending in the $2,000 to $2,500 range, and at this point the book is probably going to look a little bit self-published. If someone just picks up your book off the shelf, they probably will be able to tell that it didn't come out of a traditional publisher and certainly not a Big Five, but it's still going to look like a pretty good product, and it's still going to look professional, and it's going to be light years ahead of the book that was just slapped together for $0 and put on Amazon.
So let's go into now setting healthy expectations as a self-publisher. We're going to talk about royalties and books sold, like what you should expect. These are the other survey results from the 52 indies that I did. So basically what this shows is that on release day, an average of 60% of people sold 0 to 10 books on release day for ebooks, and an average of 77% of these 50 people sold 0 to 10 paperback books. I can guarantee you the majority of those probably sold less than 5. The first week, about 42% of these people sold 10 books. Only 20% or only 21% sold more than 10 books, or the 10 to 20 books category for ebooks. And in print, paperback, 65% of these people only sold 0 to 10. So we continue to see that high ebook, kind of low print ratio here. Within the first month, our numbers have dropped to 26 to 28% of people selling 0 to 10, and still a month later, 44% of people sold 0 to 10 books in print. Within the first year, we're seeing a bit more numbers that are encouraging. So we're seeing 31% of people sold over 200 ebooks their first year. That is really respectable. I think the average self-published author makes less than $100 their first year and sells about 100 books, I think is the numbers. And then with print, we're still seeing 20% of people selling 0 to 10 print books. It looks like the high average was 20 to 50 print books. And then high-low monthly royalties, the lowest ebooks sold monthly average, not just ebooks, the lowest monthly average is about 60% of people sold 0 to 10, and the highest, 28% of people made over $500 that first year. But the average royalty, just average those months, were 30% was 0 to 10, but we're looking at a very small sliver that's making $300 to $400 a month, and then 12% of people were making over $500 a month, which is really encouraging. And the first year total are most spread out, but the coolest number here is that 26% of people report making over $1,000 the first year of publishing. Now, these numbers are by no way a formal survey. It was just something I threw out there. They could be skewed. People probably didn't check their prices and were just guessing, but it gives you a general idea of what to expect. So I'm going to go through how many books I've sold and the royalties I've made. So in 2014, starting the 27th, when I published my first book, Miss Mayo School for Girls, I sold a total of 6,883 books that first year, bringing in a total royalty of $7,000, essentially. That was a really, really good first year for an indie. I published 2 books that first year. I had a BookBub, and so I got really good numbers. In 2015, my total books sold dropped all the way in half to 3,348, and I only brought in $4,500. That is when I had my son. And it turns out when you have a baby that has colic and a bunch of health issues, you don't get a lot of writing done. So 2015 was not a banner year for me. But in 2016, up to the end of August of this year, I have sold 51,375 books, bringing in over almost $18,000. By the end of the year, I'm projected to make over $20,000, and I'm hoping to hit at least 60,000 books sold, including books given away. So that brings our totals to 61,606 books sold up to August of this year, and I've made almost $30,000. I would call that mid-range success for a self-publisher. There are certainly people who do much less. There are many people who do much less, but I have friends who are making over $50,000 a year on their self-published books. So I consider myself a very successful self-publisher. One thing I want to talk about is the power of the backlist. There is power in numbers. If you look at this picture of Jack Reacher books, what I want to point out is that every single year, and twice in 2010, a book was released about Jack Reacher. Over time, all of those numbers really add up. There's power in numbers in publishing. You make money in publishing more books. You can't put one book out there and expect to make a lot of money. I didn't really start making money, as you saw, until I had 6 books out. For example, Jim Butcher, not including his omnibus collections, has 21. But he has omnibus collections out there, which means there's more books to buy, which means more routes for money. Nicholas Sparks has 21. Danielle Steele has 129 books, so she's raking in money. But basically, the days of outliers like Harper Lee, where they publish one book and are a wild success for the rest of their life, are pretty much gone. We are competing too much with other things like Facebook and video games for books to do that. So I'm briefly going to go through networking. Why should you network? Because you want to meet other people in the industry. It can help you spread out into other platforms outside of Amazon. Networking comes in handy when you need like an entertainment lawyer or a cover designer, a new editor. I was recently in need of an entertainment lawyer specifically to look over a shopping agreement and didn't have any idea where to go. And through people I had networked, was able to find an awesome lawyer. You should network to learn more about this industry. To provide friends that can relate to your experience and help you when you're depressed. And networking can provide new and exciting opportunities. One way to network that's really effective is to go to writing conferences. You can find one close to you. They're everywhere. Some are big, some are small. Many of them offer scholarships. If you can't afford to pay, apply for one of their scholarships. Make sure if you go to writing conferences, use your time there wisely. Use it to network. Don't be afraid to be bold. Like, you want to be smart, but also be assertive. Like, go introduce yourself to people. If there's a key presenter you really want to talk to, go talk to him. I mean, who knows what avenue this could take later in your career? Because I guarantee you much of my success as a self-publisher comes through networking, introducing myself to people, talking to them, and then following up with them later. Find other people there by themselves and form a group. If you're an introvert and you really don't like introducing yourself, there's power in numbers. You can make some friends. And then, as you talk to people, get their emails and then use them wisely. If you can help them do something, or you need some help and you've talked to them and they said it's okay to email them, email them and see if you can follow up on that. If you guys are in desperate need of networking or a team, I have this here. I'll have a copy of it on my website too if you want it. But this is my team. If you guys need editors, ebook formatters, typesetters, cover design, there's a link to the Intuit QuickBooks Self-Employed Taxes. These people are the people I use all the time. So feel free to use them and just say, hey, Katie Cross sent me over. We're nearing the end of this presentation, so I just want you to ask yourself, is the indie life for me after we've kind of thrown all this at you? A couple questions you can ask yourself to decide this is, can I pay the upfront costs of self-publishing a professional book? Will I do the work and learn how to market and sell my book? Because publishing is 10% of the journey and the rest is marketing. Are you willing to network? Are you self-motivated? Will you seek out learning opportunities? Are you committed to the readers and providing them the best book possible? And will you show business intent? I think if you can answer those, that can give you an honest self-reflection over whether this is for you, because self-publishing is not for everyone. But most importantly, I want you to ask, do I love the writing? Do I love this process? Do I love making books and putting them out there? Because if you don't love that, then there's no point in you going through all of this. Now, if you recommended resources for you, The Passive Voice is a fantastic blog I suggest you follow. He emails out every day, highlines, news, articles, any interest story on publishing in general. Passive guy is very indie bound. He supports self-publishers. He's actually a lawyer who supports self-publishers and that kind of thing. The book designer is Joel Friedlander. He has tons of resources for self-publishers, from typesetting to ebook formatting, just to marketing tips to, Carnival of the Indies. It's a fantastic blog that you have to follow if you're self-published. Hugh Howey is one of the most famous self-publishers. He had 6 or 7 books that he self-published until Wool went really big, and now he's made a lot of money, and he has print-only contracts with big publishers and that kind of thing. He has a blog that's fairly popular among self-publishers. Hugh Howey is not always loved by self-publishers, but I wanted to put this out there in case you're interested. He's also a big Amazon Kindle Select person, which a lot of indies may not also agree with. So just take his stuff with a grain of salt, but he's a good one to know. Author Earnings is good to track what's going on in the market. KM Weiland is a fantastic resource for help with structure of stories and writing a good, strong story. And Joanna Penn is huge with self-publishing and the indie movement. And she has a lot of resources, like how to typeset a book, how to do an ebook. She has audiobooks that I can absolutely recommend on the business of being an indie that you should check out. And finally, if you guys have any questions, this is how to contact me. My email is always open for all of you. I can normally get back to you within 48 hours, or shoot me a tweet. Find me on Instagram or Facebook or any of those things. And I hope to hear from you if you have any questions. And thanks so much for watching this presentation.